I never believed in ghosts. Growing up, I had always thought they were just tales meant to scare kids or pass the time around a campfire. Now, sitting here alone in the cold, silent night, I wish I had taken those stories more seriously. I wish we had never come to this cursed lake. It was supposed to be a fun weekend. Just a few friends, some beers, and the tranquility of nature. Mark, our unofficial leader, had suggested the camping trip. He was always the adventurous type, the one who liked to push boundaries and drag us out of our comfort zones. When he mentioned this secluded lake in the middle of nowhere, it sounded perfect. The last hurrah before summer ended, the last chance to get away from the stresses of work, college, and life. The drive out to the lake took us hours. By the time we got there, the sun was low, casting long shadows over the dirt road that wound through the thick woods. The lake itself was serene, a mirror-like surface reflecting the darkening sky. There wasn't another soul in sight, which made it even more appealing. Perfect spot for a ghost story, Mark joked, as we unpacked the gear. Little did we know, those words would come back to haunt us. The group consisted of me, Mark, Jess, Tyler, and Sarah. We'd been friends since high school, inseparable through all the ups and downs life threw our way. This trip was supposed to be our way of reconnecting, rekindling that bond that felt like it had been fraying lately. Jess and Tyler had been dating for years, and they were always glued to each other's sides. Sarah, ever the skeptic and always the voice of reason, laughed off Mark's comment about ghost stories, calling it childish. I stayed quiet. Something about this place felt off. But I didn't want to seem like the paranoid one. I wanted to believe it was just the eerie beauty of the lake messing with my head. We set up camp near the water, just a few feet from the tree line. The fire was roaring within an hour, and soon we were laughing, drinking, and swapping stories. As night fell, a thick fog rolled in from the lake, creeping toward us like some sort of living thing. It made the air cold, colder than it should have been for that time of year. I could feel it settling in my bones, but everyone else seemed unfazed. Maybe it was the beer, or maybe it was something more. That first night, everything seemed fine. We stayed up late, way past midnight, talking about everything and nothing. Eventually, we all retired to our tents, exhausted but content. The lake, now hidden beneath a blanket of fog, lapped quietly at the shore, the sound somehow both calming and unsettling. I awoke in the middle of the night to a strange noise, a whisper. At first I thought it was the wind, but when I sat up and strained to listen, it sounded like voices, faint, almost like they were coming from beneath the water. I shook it off, telling myself it was just my imagination, and crawled back into my sleeping bag. But sleep didn't come easily after that. The next morning, Mark was gone. At first, we thought he was just messing with us. He was known for his pranks, always trying to scare the rest of us. Jess laughed it off, saying he was probably hiding in the woods, waiting to jump out and freak us all out. But as the hours ticked by and there was no sign of him, we started to get worried. Tyler suggested we split up and search the area. Sarah and I took the woods, while Jess and Tyler combed the shoreline. We called his name over and over, but the only answer we got was the eerie silence of the forest and the soft ripple of water. After what felt like hours, we regrouped back at camp. There was no sign of Mark. His tent was untouched, his bag still where he'd left it. It was like he had simply vanished. Jess was panicking now, tears in her eyes as she paced back and forth. This isn't like him. He wouldn't just leave like this. Sarah tried to stay calm, but I could see the fear creeping into her eyes too. Maybe he got lost in the woods. We should go back out, maybe head deeper this time. But I had a feeling deep in my gut that something was wrong. really wrong. Mark wasn't the type to get lost. He was an experienced camper, and this whole area wasn't that large. I didn't want to say it out loud, but part of me wondered if, maybe, something had happened to him. We spent the rest of the day searching, but it was as if the earth had swallowed him whole. By nightfall, there was still no sign of Mark, and the unease that had settled over us was suffocating. We decided to stay one more night at the camp, hoping he would show up by morning. Jess was adamant that he was playing some sort of sick joke, but I could tell she didn't really believe it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my tent, wide awake, listening to the soft sounds of the night. The fog had returned, thicker than before, swirling around the campsite like ghostly fingers. And then I heard it again. I shot up, my heart racing. For a moment I thought I saw something moving through the fog, a shadowy figure just beyond the firelight. But when I blinked, it was gone. I crawled out of my tent, the cold air biting at my skin, and found Sarah already outside, staring at the lake. "You hear that?" she whispered. I nodded, moving to stand next to her. The whispers were unmistakable now, a soft, eerie murmur that seemed to rise up from the water itself. We both stood there, frozen, as the fog shifted and swirled across the lake surface. And then we saw it, a figure barely visible in the mist, standing on the shore, just a few feet from the water. It was Mark, or at least it looked like him, but there was something off, something wrong with the way he stood there, motionless, staring at us. His eyes, they were blank, empty. "Mark," Sarah called out, her voice trembling. The figure didn't move. I took a step forward, my heart pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. "Mark, where the hell have you been?" No answer, just the whispering, louder now, like 100 voices all speaking at once, but none of them making any sense. I reached out toward him, and that's when I noticed the water. It was lapping at his feet, but not in the way it should. The waves seemed to be pulling at him, almost like they were alive, dragging him back into the lake. "Come back," I shouted, but before I could take another step, the fog thickened, swirling around him like a living thing. In an instant he was gone, swallowed by the mist. I stood there stunned, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Sarah grabbed my arm, pulling me back toward the campfire. "What the hell was that?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "I don't know," I muttered, my mind racing. "I don't know." We spent the rest of the night huddled by the fire, too scared to go back to our tents. Jess and Tyler hadn't seen anything, but when we told them what had happened, their faces went pale. We all knew something was wrong, but none of us wanted to say it out loud. The next morning, Tyler was gone. We found his tent empty, his bag still inside, untouched, just like Mark. Jess broke down, sobbing uncontrollably as Sarah tried to comfort her. I stood there, staring at the lake, the whispers still echoing in my ears. I knew deep down that whatever was taking them wasn't human. We packed up our camp in a frenzy, all of us too scared to stay another night. But as we started to leave, Sarah stopped, her eyes fixed on the water. "We can't just leave them," she said softly. "We don't have a choice," I shot back, my voice harsher than I intended. "We need to get out of here." But Sarah wouldn't move. She kept staring at the lake, her face pale, as if she was listening to something none of us could hear. And then, without a word, she started walking toward the water. "Sarah," I shouted, grabbing her arm, but she jerked away, her eyes glazed over, like she was in some sort of trance. She kept walking, stepping into the water deeper and deeper, until the fog swallowed her whole. "Sarah, no!" Jess screamed, running after her. But it was too late. She was gone, just like Mark and Tyler. Now it's just me and Jess, sitting by the fire, waiting for the inevitable. The whispers are louder now, surrounding us, creeping into our minds. I can see them out there, in the fog. Mark, Tyler, Sarah, standing on the shore, waiting for us. Jess is crying again, rocking back and forth, her eyes wide with terror. "We need to leave," she whispers, "but we both know it's too late. The lake has claimed them, and soon it will claim us too."